Hello, everyone. Rachel Weaver here. I'm on faculty at Regis University's Mile High MFA program. I'm making a series of videos in which I am exploring various things that we can all do with a background in writing. So today, Maya Kleve is here with us. Thanks for being here, Maya. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
She owns her own editing business in which you do lots of different types of work. So I'll ask you first just to tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so what I do is I do everything from editorial beta reads on new manuscripts for authors who aren't quite sure what the next step in their process might be. I do some developmental editing, which is basically helping authors figure out if everything fits together in the story, if there's any gaps in the story, if there needs to be more character development in the story. Also, whether or not the characters that they've got make sense, or if they need to either combine some characters or remove some characters. That sometimes happens. I don't really do a lot of content editing. I expect the authors to have a pretty good idea of what they want to say as they're going along. So I just try to give them guidelines as far as how to pull everything together. I also do proofing and copy editing, which right now with the indie market and the self-publishing market, that seems to be more of a combined process as opposed to two separate processes as it used to be in the print world. So I find more and more that I'm putting those two services together. So I don't really separate those out anymore. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I try to separate out my day based on the types of projects I have. As anybody who works with words all day long can attest, sometimes your brain gets tired working on the same thing for too long. So if I can change from one thing to another, then I can keep my brain fresh for the different types of work. So I try to stagger my schedule a little bit so I'm not working on the same thing all the time. I did forget one thing. One of the publishers that I work with, I help run their proofing teams. They have several teams that are set up to do proofing for, started out with works that were out of print and we wanted to put into print, but one of the steps in the process was scanning the books into an electronic format. And of course, computers are not perfect, and old print on the old pulp paper makes it really hard for the computers to be able to scan it consistently. So we would go through and make sure that strange characters didn't get put through, that it didn't put in a period where it needed to be comma or vice versa, so everything read the way it was supposed to. And so one of the things I do for them, in addition to the proofing and helping out the other folks, is putting the scanned document into a format that is about halfway to what the finished product is going to be. So that's not something that's done later, that's something we do up front. And then I can apply certain searches, I can apply certain house standards when I see them as I'm going through, things like that. So it's formatting of a sort. It's not the type of formatting that is done for pre-press type of stuff.
And how did you start your business, and how did you grow your business to the point where it is now?
Okay, so I started my business. I was actually one of the volunteers on the proofing teams for that publisher. And as I gained more experience, the publisher asked me to start doing more and more work that was beyond what we were asking the proofers to do. So I just started taking that on, learning as I went, and I was working a full-time job at this time too. So we didn't have projects come through very often, so it didn't put a huge burden on my spare time. And as I got going, I realized this was really the sort of stuff, because I grew up reading. I love reading. I always have a book with me. So I was doing something that I enjoyed while I got to read. So I just kept picking up skills. Then one day they said that they had a new manuscript. Like I said, that wasn't normal for them, but they really wanted to publish this person and asked me if I wanted to do a developmental edit on it. And I said, sure. So I jumped into it, got a little bit of experience, realized that I might have been a little bit overboard on some stuff and not quite so good on others. But because I knew the author and I knew the publisher, we were able to work back and forth. The other thing is when you're working in a situation like that, that's actually how you want to be able to communicate with the authors. Is you don't want, I know that there is this concept in most people's brains that editors tell authors they have to make these changes, and authors are like, no, I don't want to make these changes. But that's not the kind of relationship you want to have. You want to have it where the editor says, all of this is really good, but you need to fix these things. And at least I try to with my clients, have them be able to come back to me and say, okay, well, why do I need to do this? Can you explain this a little bit further? So that as we continue to work, they understand that if I'm asking them to make a change or asking them to modify something, that I do have a reason behind it. And then they also feel comfortable if something doesn't quite feel right to them, they can come back to me and say, hey, I don't necessarily want to do this for this particular instance. And then we can talk through it, and I'll either say, that's fine, or I can say, well, how about we do this, or come up with another idea. So started out with the proofing, moved into the dev editing, and that was the point where I decided that if I was going to continue doing it, I needed to decide if I wanted to do it full time eventually. And that was about 7 years. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was about 5 years ago. So I started putting into place what I wanted to do. I started checking out pricing, looking into the different levels of editing to make sure that I could structure my pricing and my skill sets for each of the different types of editing. And then I started really simple. I started talking to authors. I went to conventions. I handed out price cards to people. And then I also went to a writers convention here in Colorado, Superstars Writing Seminar, and I started talking to folks there, and also handing out my price card, talking to the authors, see what they needed. And I ended up being one of 2 people that I know, at least at that time, who were strictly editors. We did not do writing as part of our career path. Josh has since started writing, but he does editing books, and they're really great. But that's something that a lot of people find unusual, is that I'm not a writer on top of the editing. I think I froze. Okay.
Yeah, you did freeze for a minute, but you were saying that you, oh, there you are. Can you unmute?
Sorry, I apologize. I have a very unstable connection, and of course it decides right now to drop.
That's fine. You were just saying that you cut out right about the point where you're saying that some people find it unusual that you are strictly an editor and not necessarily a writer.
Right, because I think in the past, at least up until the last 25 years, where self-publishing has really become a popular way for people to get their books out, it was always you had people who wrote and then who would hire on with publishers, and then they started doing editing on top of it or something like that. So I not as much anymore, but I used to get really odd looks when I told them that I didn't write. I can help somebody polish what they've written, but trying to get an idea out of my head onto paper is not something that I do.
And then my final question for you would be, do you have any advice for someone who feels like this is a great path and they want to pursue it and they want to get started building their own editing business?
Sure. My biggest piece of advice is to start networking. If they're writers already, chances are they are part of writers groups or attend conferences. They will most likely want to take some classes. Unfortunately, I can't say that I've done the same. I'm mostly self-taught. I have lots of books sitting around my desk where I'm learning this stuff, because a lot of what I know is just from all the reading I've done. But I want to know what the specific terminology is. I want to know how to explain it to people, because unfortunately, when you say, well, it just sounds better that way, that doesn't come across very well. But I recently joined the Editorial Freelancers Association, which is one of 3 big organizations around editing. And the reason I actually spent the money to do that is because they provide seminars and online training at a discount, which is something that I want to take advantage of. There are job lists where you get emails from people who are looking for different types of editors, and then you can send them your resume basically, and say, this is why you should hire me. The other thing is don't underestimate your skill level. One of the things that I hear a lot from folks is, oh, well, I'm afraid to charge that much because people will say no. Well, yes, you're going to have a certain number of people who don't want to pay the higher price, but if your skill level justifies it, eventually it'll get around. Yeah, they're expensive, but, and that's where you need to make sure you're at. So I'm always reading. I'm always trying to learn. I follow my friend Josh, who I said is writing the editing books and things like that, because he's been at it longer. And so I want to make sure that what I've learned matches with the advice that he's giving to writers and editors. So that's the type of thing. So don't be afraid to follow other editors. Don't be afraid to learn from other people who have been doing it longer. Or even people who haven't been doing it longer, but clearly have a very good grasp of their skills and their knowledge, and are doing very well at it.
Thank you so much for your time, Maya. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Yeah.